Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for our Unity and Empowerment event with Exchange for Change. Whether you are joining us live right now or watching at a later date and time, we're still so excited to have you here to hear about an amazing program, Exchange for Change. And so, just to get started, I'm going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Catherine Periel. I am one of two statewide organizers on the Campaign for Justice here at the ACLU of Florida, she, her pronouns. And now I will pass it to our amazing panelists that we have joining us this evening. Kathy, please feel free to get started.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining in. My name is Kathy Klarich, and I'm the founder and executive director of Exchange for Change, which you'll hear about in the next hour and a half. But we're basically a South Florida-based nonprofit that teaches writing in prisons with the mission of bringing in communication skills on the inside and the voice of the incarcerated back out to the community. And I'm going to pass it over to the amazing Steph Rubino.
I'm Steph Rubino. I've been with Exchange for Change for about 2.5 years now, which seems crazy, right, Kathy? And I am an inside facilitator outside of Exchange for Change. I'm a high school English teacher, so I'll pass it over to Paul.
Hi, my name's Paul Feigenbaum. I use he, his pronouns. I'm an associate professor of writing in the English department at Florida International University. I've been working with Exchange for Change also for a couple of years, and I'm currently co-teaching a course at Homestead Women's Institution with my colleague Tanya Lopez, who's also a professor at FIU. The theme is writing and resilience.
Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. And I'm going to quickly just say I am an FIU alumni, so very excited about that. And so just to get started this evening, I know you've already told us a little bit about Exchange for Change, but can you tell us a little bit more, especially if you can, how it came into fruition?
So I could probably talk for the next hour and a half about Exchange for Change and how it came to be, but I will, out of respect for the audience and my fellow panelists, I'll try and condense it. So my career really has been as a journalist, but I had an experience back in the late 90s, I'm showing my age, early 2000s, I think, where I went into the women's prison to see a dance performance by an organization that actually is no longer around, but for the old timers, it was called Art Spring, that taught dance and movement inside Homestead Correctional Institution, which for those of you who live in South Florida, it's down by the Everglades. If you got off at the last exit of the turnpike before you head off to the Keys, it's right down the street from Robert is Here before you tune off to the Everglades, and people don't even know that it's there. There are should be about 650 women that are housed there. The performance had maybe a dozen women or so that put on this amazing dance performance. And let me just say that it sort of sat in the back of my mind and percolated for years and years and years. I was a full-time journalist. And when I decided I didn't want to be a journalist anymore, but I wanted to do something with my area of expertise, which was Haiti, I thought, well, this is an interesting opportunity to offer a writing course for Haitian women inside Homestead Correctional Institution. So I approached Art Spring and I said, I know you guys are dance and movement, but what do you think about adding this other discipline? And they were all for it. The only problem was that not enough Haitian women inside Homestead signed up for it. So I said, well, that's okay. I'll teach writing. So that was back in 2009. For all you Haiti files, that was right before the first big earthquake in January of 2010. So I went back to Haiti and stayed for another 3 years. And when I came back to Homestead in 2013, the thing that struck me was that all of the women who I had been teaching seemed to be doing the exact same thing, right? They were wearing the same uniforms. They were walking the same paths. They were eating the same meals. And my life, having spent 3 years in Haiti after the earthquake, had turned completely upside down. And I thought there's more to this story than what I'm seeing. And I want to hear what has been going on in these women's lives. And I want them to be the one telling the story as opposed to me as a journalist telling their story. So long story short, that became the genesis of what turned out to be a nonprofit, which is Exchange for Change. And then sort of the rest is history. But we did go from founding the organization in 2014 at the men's prison. I actually left the women's prison and moved to the men's prison on the same compound. Started with one class, and then by the time the pandemic shut us down in 2020, we were teaching 33 classes in one semester, and it reached over probably 1,200 to 1,500 students by then.
Thank you so much for all of that background. It's really enlightening. I'm also going to say this, I am Haitian. And so, so it's truly amazing to hear that the work that you were doing started. We have a lot of similarities. And so I'd love to, you told us a little bit about it already, but I would love to, if you guys can you tell us a little bit more about some of your programs? As I was on your website, I saw, Writing as Resilience, Black History 202, poetry, as well as Introduction to Ethics. So how did some of those classes, how do they make a difference? And what do they add really to those who are incarcerated and a part of this program?
So just to put the context in, and then I want Steph and Paul to talk about their courses. We started off with just core writing courses, right? The basic intro to fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. But then as the program grew, and this will come as no surprise to anybody listening, right? Inside a prison, it's a microcosm of the same population that lives on the outside with a diversity of interests and expertise and curiosity. And so we were able to attract amazing people like Paul and Steph, who said, I want this experience. I want to be able to go inside and teach. And so when we have people with their interest and experience and expertise, we offer any course that has a writing component. So I'll let them talk about how they came up with the courses and what the content is. So Steph, you want to go?
Yeah, I guess I'll go. I was gonna let Paul go, but it's okay. So I actually started teaching when I started teaching with Exchange for Change. They needed a poetry course, so I taught 2 poetry courses, and then when Kathy told us that we were going to go inside, and now the pandemic restrictions have been lifted, they were asking us what we would be interested in teaching. And so for my first semester on the inside, I taught an art of argument class, because that's kind of my area of expertise in my like everyday job. I teach a writing and rhetoric class for high schoolers. So that's kind of where my like interest lies. And I also thought an argumentative writing class would give the students on the inside the opportunity to practice those skills. A lot of them are preparing for their appeals by themselves, or like with the help of the prison law clerk, which is they don't get a lot of time with the prison law clerk, so they're doing it all on their own. So I thought that those kind of skills would be helpful for them in working on their own case and studying their own case. And also I just wanted to give them an opportunity to like explore things that they're interested in, and like explore topics that they care about, and say something about those things, and just get their viewpoints out there. So that was the art of argument class. Now this semester I'm teaching something that's a little different. That is kind of like Exchange for Change is like bread and butter. I'm teaching an exchange class, which means my students on the inside are communicating with students on the outside. And they've been just sharing readings on prison education and like the purpose of prison education, and also prison abolition and prison reform and the differences between those things. So they've been swapping letters back and forth, and now they're working on like a final collaborative project that the students are putting together, with all of the letters and information that they've been gathering over the course of the semester.
Well, thank you so much for that. I definitely have some follow-up for you, but Paul, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd like to take Steph's class myself. So the class Writing and Resilience that we're teaching now, Tanya Lopez and myself, was actually inspired to a large extent by conversations that I've been having with FIU colleagues and my experiences in my classes at FIU with our students who have been basically taught to have a lot of anxiety around the prospect of failure. Whereas I think failure is a key part of learning and creativity and growth. It's critical to any process of growth, making mistakes, trial and error, learning from experiences, getting feedback, and being willing to take creative risks. But I think the education system that we have has really discouraged that among students. And I've been dealing with that firsthand as a teacher for years. So I've been trying to teach in a way that would support students' willingness to be aware of that problem and overcome it. And a lot of my colleagues have had similar experiences, and we've brainstormed a lot, particularly in the writing program at FIU, about how to support what I call generative failure, which is this idea that making mistakes in the short run is a very important learning opportunity in the long run, and being willing to embrace that, the messiness of learning. So Tanya and I thought it might be an interesting idea or theme to do at Homestead. We decided to call it resilience rather than failure, because failure can be taken so many different ways. And we do think that failure is very much connected to resilience. And even the process of writing, of expressing oneself creatively, can be therapeutic and promote resilience. So we decided to try that class, and I think it's been very well received by the students. We've had a lot of interesting conversations about what it means to fail, what it means to overcome experiences of failure, to learn and grow from failure, and a wide variety of interpretations of the theme of resilience, both in texts that we have read together and increasingly the writing that the students themselves are producing.
So I just want to say, I think some of the amazing things you guys mentioned, Steph, with you, it was using the skills that they're learning for appeals. And then Paul, you mentioned learning from failure and promoting resistance, which I think so many people can benefit from these lessons, but I think it's extra important for those who you guys are working with. So what are some of the effects that you've seen it have on the participants, other than what you've already shared, if you don't mind going into some more detail?
So I'm going to let Paul or Steph take a stab at this. I have hundreds of examples, but you guys, I'd love for you to share some of yours.
I think the biggest effect that I've noticed is just confidence and being able to express themselves clearly, and also great gratitude for the fact that their stuff is getting out to people on the outside, especially with this exchange that I'm doing this semester. I think one of the things that is said in every single class is, wow, people on the outside care what I have to say. That's really amazing. They think that, I don't, the experience that I've had this semester and last semester too, actually, they don't know that I don't know if they're not clued into the fact that there's a lot of people doing work on the outside that are trying to help them, and people are out here caring about them, doing work towards getting mandatory minimums removed, and doing work towards prison abolitionist principles. They didn't know that people really cared about that stuff. And so I think one of the things that I've noticed is, or they don't realize that, or they are not thinking about it because they just don't have like time in their day, and like there's a lot of stuff going on in prison. So I think one of the things that I've noticed is that they, like I said, they're increasing confidence in just being able to express themselves, and they're just gratitude that people really, really care about what they have to say. That's really nice. Also, of course, like their writing improves a lot over this course of the semester. Just like the practice of it. Even if I'm not one of those people who's like a stickler for grammar or anything like that. I want them to express themselves in any way that they see fit, because that's more so what I care about is the content and like the ideas there. But as they're practicing, they get better. As they're reading, because they also read a great deal. I mean, I know Kathy can probably tell you more like about how much they read, but every course is giving them also reading, a lot of readings, and so they're just learning to write better, to read better, to become like more expansive in their thinking. And I think that is just awesome to see, because it's with kids, it's kind of like, for me, I'm a high school English teacher, so with kids it's expected. Like I expect that to happen. With adults, it's a little harder, like in my everyday life, like talking to adults is a little harder, but seeing them just be like welcoming to new ideas and willing to like chew on the new ideas and just think about them deeply. It's an amazing experience, I think, for myself and for them.
I agree with everything Steph said, and in particular, the terms gratitude and confidence stood out for me as really resonant with my experiences. I think one of the things that I've really noticed, especially in recent weeks, is I think this theme of learning to recognize that failure is an inevitable and natural part of life and learning and growth is sinking in that more students, some of the students who are more reserved earlier on and not speaking up as much in class have really started to open up increasingly. I think an important shift happened when we moved away from bringing in texts to read and asking the students to share their own texts in what we call peer workshopping is a very typical practice in a writing course in college. And so first, Tanya, my colleague, did it herself. She took an essay that she had written for another context that she called A History of Failure. And it's a really compelling essay about her own personal experiences as a Cuban immigrant, with her own kind of stigmatized history, feeling that failure was something that had to be avoided at all costs, and how she has changed her perspective in various ways, and ultimately how that has affected her teaching. And so that was a really vulnerable essay that really, I think, opened up a space for people to share their personal experiences. And now we've shifted to the students' own writing. So every week Tanya takes somebody's writing, makes copies so that everybody can read it. The author reads their text aloud, and then we just spend 20 to 30 minutes per essay workshopping. And some of the students who, again, they were barely speaking early in the semester, they've shared their work, they've gotten really great feedback. And that's the other thing that I want to emphasize is the sense of community that has grown in the course over the course of the semester, the incredible support people give each other, and also the really insightful feedback and comments that people have on each other's writing. That's been really great to see. But so many of the essays, because they're about experiences of resilience, are vulnerable. There's a lot of vulnerability in the room that I think is a way that promotes bonding and unity and a form of empowerment, I would say. And that, just in the past 2 to 3 weeks, seeing that emerge has been really gratifying for me.
Thanks. I want to once again pull out some of the things that you guys mentioned, that they're expressing that people on the outside care what they have to say. There may be times that they feel forgotten. They don't know the work that's being done on the outside in order to help them. And how you pointed out that you elevate their content, which allows them to fully express themselves, where they're showing empowerment and vulnerability, and just how important this is, not only I think for them, but also for those of us on the outside who don't truly know their experiences, who don't truly know what it is that they're going through, and trying to break some of those stigmas that maybe people have about anyone who is currently incarcerated. So if you don't mind, can you share about a piece or something that was shared in one of your courses that may have had the most impact on you, or even just a few that really resonated?
Kevin, before we go on, can I just add a few more things to enlarge the context of what
course.
Paul and Steph were sharing?
Please.
So I wanted just to pick up on one of the things that Paul was talking about, which was a sense of community. So when we came up with this name, Exchange for Change, originally the idea was the course that Steph is talking about, which pairs the incarcerated writer with writers on the outside in some academic institution, right? So whether it is University of Miami or Florida International or Miami-Dade College. So that was this idea of exchange, from the outside to the inside. But what we saw happening organically was the exchange that was happening inside the classroom. And I think Paul really spoke about a community happening inside the classroom. And for us in the very beginning, what we really did not expect was this sense of looking out for and taking care of each other, particularly when they would share vulnerable pieces. And I'm going to go with the stereotypes, right? We sort of expect women to be nurturing and maybe a little bit more forgiving. But when I saw it happening in the men's prison, where you have men in there who you might not expect to allow themselves to become vulnerable. And the first time I saw this happen, when someone had been sexually molested, and the support that he got from his fellow classmates to share his story with them, I don't think I'll ever forget that particular experience. I also saw gang members from rival gangs come together to talk about literature, and that spills out onto the compound. And that was years ago at Dade Correctional. And just today I was inside at Everglades Correctional, and they were talking about the fact that they have created the exact same thing over at Everglades in a completely different prison environment with a completely different set of issues, because each prison has its own set of issues, and it's being replicated again. So it's not by mistake that that happens when you create an environment where people feel safe. And I think the most important thing that we do as facilitators with Exchange for Change, honestly, is not what we teach, but that we show up every week and they know that we are there because we want to be there. They can count on us. And then inside that classroom, whether it is talking about failures and success or abolitionism or the history of Shakespeare, the trauma toolkit, James Joyce, right? No matter the subject, it allows people to remember that they're people, that they have an opinion, that their voice matters. And we have developed many programs now to make sure that we create lots of avenues for their voices to be heard on the outside.
One, thank you for all of that. And one thing that you say, we at the ACLU talk a lot about storytelling and why it's so important, because like you said, they are getting a chance to express themselves. You have given them a safe space to do that, with individuals that they know you've built a rapport with, and they feel comfortable with you guys. So I know that the work that you all do does not go without an amazing effect and change. And so you've already started to share a little bit about the impact that some of the work that you guys are doing is having on you. So if you guys don't mind just sharing a little bit more about anything that, or any pieces or stories, obviously no names and no, you don't have to go into too much detail, but just like a overriding, I guess, story.
I could share a few. I think a common theme that I've seen this semester is the difficulties of being separated from one's children and trying to work through that and trying to maintain a relationship and working through just the complexity of emotions connected to that. But also, people have been talking about their own childhood experiences, and in many cases, very, very difficult, traumatic childhoods that they had. And I mean, I hope it's somewhat therapeutic to write about it, but it's reading it and just seeing these experiences that were probably never treated by professionals, not getting the care that they needed, and just trying to wonder how those experiences led to later experiences has been very impactful. And then some stories focus more on kind of the daily dehumanization that happens in prison, but in a way that's disarmingly humorous and ironic. And what I really am impressed with is the ability to find humor in it, like kind of a almost like I see it as kind of a combination of Kafkaesque and Monty Python, where it's absurd, that the conditions are absurd to the point that they're funny, but they're also obviously tragic and real at the same time. And there's a real skill in showing that in a way that people can digest it and laugh at it in some respects, but also be horrified at the same time.
Yeah, I think obviously the pieces that impact me the most are I'm impacted by everything. I won't lie. I'm like so sensitive. Kathy knows. Like I'm really just a sensitive person. I'm impacted by everything. I've also spent a lot of time as a community organizer, and I worked a lot with people who are homeless, and many of them are formerly incarcerated people. So there's a lot of stories that I heard doing that work that I've heard again doing this work. The thing that really impacts me the most is our conversations every week, the conversations that we have on the readings every week. And it's not because their writing is not good. Their writing is great. It's just because a lot of times I will assign a reading or I'll assign something and I expect them to get like one or two things out of it, but then they'll get this whole other thing out of it and it brings something else out of them that I just like don't expect or plan for. For instance, last semester, I gave a lot of readings on a lot of different perspectives from men on masculinity. And just some of the things that were coming up in the class conversations, like nobody chose to write their final piece on that or anything, but just some of the conversations that we were having were so shocking to me. I remember I would like walk out of class and just like try to write down, like I would try to write down what I could remember just so that I would have it like in my own stuff, just so I could remember those ideas. And this semester, I'm kind of having the same experience where we're talking about a lot of things that, they don't necessarily, just because they're in prison, they don't necessarily agree with everything that prison abolitionists or prison reformists have to say. They're just like people on the outside. So we're talking about a lot of topics that are hard for people to discuss. And so oftentimes in the conversations, like I said before, I kind of expect them to go one way and they go the complete different way, and it's like detours towards like what I'm trying to get at, but it's totally fine because they've gotten so much out of it. And that is those are generally the things that impact me the most, because they're just like saying how they feel in that moment. They're just like saying their ideas in that moment. It's a lot different than something that they're like contemplating and pouring time into. They're just kind of like bringing it out of themselves really quickly. And that like those little sparks of vulnerability, or those little sparks of like being, even if it's not a vulnerable thing, even if it's not something that has to do with their past or what they've done, but being willing to like share an idea that might be so different from everybody else's idea, that is also vulnerability too. And so that always like gets me. I'm always like, okay, where do I go from here now, guys? Like, I'm like, somebody else take it, and like pick it up from here. So yeah, those are the things that really get me.
I want to say, I think a lot of what you said highlights the need for some of the resources that should be available to everyone, like counseling, because you guys have said that there are things that come up that you all have given us a safe space for them to discuss and share. But what could have been had they gotten those resources earlier on in their lives? What could have been if they were in spaces where they were able to share their ideas and share their thoughts and processes? Like what could have been if they had those kind of opportunities, and why it's so important that we provide those opportunities now. And we do have some change in our criminal justice system. And by some, I mean a lot. And by a lot, I mean a complete restructuring of the system. But with that, I'm going to do just a quick to let everyone watching know, if you guys have any questions for us, please feel free to drop them as a comment, and we will do our best to get to them near the end of this conversation. But really quick, just because I was talking about resources, I'd love to know how has Exchange for Change kind of prepared participants for reentry? What the skills that you all are able to teach them? How does it help them as they become returning citizens?
So a couple things about our student body. We are open to any student who wants to take our class, which also puts us in a special category because in the state of Florida, many programs are not available to people with life sentences. Years ago, when the Florida legislature cut the budget, most programs were eliminated. The state of Florida has to provide general education. So the GED must be an option for anyone who's incarcerated. And when we started the program, what we wanted to do was offer something that was not available. So there are probably a couple people who do not have their GED, but the vast majority of our students have their GED, but did not necessarily have a great relationship with an educational system, growing up for whatever reason. So that's the first thing, is that we are open to anybody who wants to take our classes. Our youngest student is I'm pretty sure he's in his early 20s. Our oldest student is probably in his late 60s. We have somebody getting out in 2 weeks. We had somebody who just got out, and I would say about half of our students have life sentences. So one of the goals of our program is not, as many people might think, recidivism, which is to make sure that when people get out, they don't come back in. Our goal really is to provide educational opportunities to whoever wants it, because we strongly believe that education is a human right and doesn't stop just because you're incarcerated. So that being said, we still try and provide as many opportunities for people to improve their communication skills. So those that are getting out will be able to have a better chance of succeeding. And I want to give an example. This was years ago, I'd say maybe 6 years ago, at Dade Correctional Institution, which was our flagship institution. A bunch of vets came to me and said, could you teach a course on PTSD? And I said, well, one, I'm not a therapist, so no, probably not. But I spent a lot of time in Haiti, where there was a lot of PTSD for all the obvious reasons, from the violence and the political upheaval and just surviving in a country that at the time seemed like it couldn't get any worse and has only deteriorated in the last 20 or 30 years. But I said, sure, we can offer a course that will allow you to address some of the trauma that you experienced as a vet. And what happened was that not a single student talked about war experiences. They talked about the trauma that they experienced in life, mostly as a kid or going into prison, right? Because anybody who makes that transition from the outside going inside is traumatized, right? You lose all of your rights and all of your freedom, in theory. And so they ended up writing about that. And at the end of the semester, I said, hey guys, this is not just for vets. Let's open up this course. So it became a tool for people to address some of the things that they may not have talked about. And I think both Steph and Paul would agree that a lot of the personal writing addresses trauma in some form, right? And we are not therapists, but what we are doing is providing them the skill set to better express themselves in a safe environment. We do have a couple of people who are therapists who are teaching for us. Paul has also taught a course on meditation and movement and yoga, which is, another form of this. But we currently have a course at the Reentry Center, and the Reentry Center is for people who have 3 years or less that are getting out, that we call the Trauma Toolbox. And that particular instructor does have a degree to teach this kind of course. And her course is focused around what triggers you. And when you're triggered, what can you do? How can you better communicate so that the trigger doesn't then result in behavior that's going to end, get you back in trouble? So through our courses, we hope to provide some of those skills, but we are really clear. We don't go in as therapists. We don't try and be therapists, but we do try and provide opportunities for people to express themselves. And one more thing I wanted to say when you were talking about the lack of resources, in general, every person is assigned a mental health counselor, but it is, I think the ratio is about 1 to 64. So one mental health counselor has about 64 people. You can imagine how often they get to those 64 people and how little attention is paid and how little follow-up by the sheer number. And I'm not faulting anybody. I'm just saying you look at the numbers, man, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's definitely not a fault to anyone in particular. I think it's a fault in the system, and how mental health has not been a priority. I want to say ever. But I do think providing resources like having individuals learn their triggers is important. And when I say I think anybody should learn their triggers, really, just because life is full of sometimes unfortunate circumstances. And so it's important to be able to equip yourself with the tools to be able to deal with anything that may come up. So I'm going to do a quick call out for any questions just one more time, but I am going to ask you guys, how can people become involved with Exchange for Change?
Actually, Kat, can I just add something to what Kathy was saying before?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that one of the things that is, because Kathy was talking about how Exchange for Change just accepts anyone. And one of the things that I think is, like into the classes, one of the things that I think is important, if you're involved in any work that is that is trying to address the problems in the justice system, I think it is important to do stuff that supports prisoners in some way and like supports them directly in some way. There's tons of like prison pen pal exchanges that are run by other nonprofit organizations. There's other ways to get involved in supporting prisoners. And the thing that is magical about Exchange for Change is that straight up, that's what it's for. Like, it's just for supporting them. It is not like, I know, I'm sure some of them wish that they could get like some kind of credit for doing the class, like some kind of outside credit for doing the classes. I'm sure some of them would love that. But the thing that it makes it so good, and the thing that makes it so, or that I've noticed that makes it so good for the people who are inside, is that they know we're just there because we want to support them. We're not trying to get them from one place to another necessarily. We're not trying to, like, I don't know, change them entirely, you know? We're not there to save them. We're just like trying to support them and like give them some tools in their toolbox that they could use later on. And that is what is really special, I think, about Exchange for Change. I just wanted to add on. Sorry, I know you asked another question, but I just wanted to add on what Kathy was saying, because I just think this is, and I just think this is the most important aspect of Exchange for Change, is that it's straight up just like a support program for these people. And like, it's just to help them, like I said, like get some tools in their toolbox, and it's just to help them like expand themselves, and nothing has to come of that, because really the expansion is enough, you know, and that's what makes Exchange for Change so great. So I just wanted to like make sure that
No, yeah, don't apologize. I think that everything you said was so important, and I thank you for bringing it up and saying it, because I do think that it's an important aspect. So thank you very much. Don't apologize for jumping in. That's what we're here to do. We're here to have a conversation and talk really about Exchange for Change and why it's so important. And with that being said, you guys can let us know, how can anybody watching or anybody who'd like more information, how can they become involved with Exchange for Change if they'd also like to be able to be a support and maybe just a listening ear to those who are incarcerated?
Well, I can give you a laundry list of ways to get involved.
Yes.
And the easiest one is just as a voter. Everybody can do this. When you go to the polls, do your homework, see where people are with criminal justice reform, and make sure you pay attention to it. Florida has some of the harshest sentencing laws in the nation. It took a lot of work for us to restore the rights for formerly incarcerated people to be able to vote. And even with that, we're still struggling to get them registered and not be discriminated against to be able to vote. So that's the easiest thing. If you're of age, pay attention when you go to the polls. But now specifically to help our organization, actually the timing is great. We have some exciting things that are currently in the works and that are coming up. So if you are a listener and you're in South Florida, please go to our website, which is exchangeforchange.org, with hyphens in between, and it's FOR, like the word, exchange-for-change.org. And there's a bunch of opportunities there. So one would be to attend one of our graduations. So every semester in the fall and in the spring, we host a graduation. So the students at the individual correctional institutions where we are audition to be able to perform a piece. The graduations are not your typical cap and gown where you get a little certificate and we call off your names. It's a showcase, and people stand up and get to present something that they've worked on during the semester. And you get to go in before the program starts and talk to our students, sit with them, find out what motivates them, what courses they took. And then we have the actual show, the performance, and then there's a chance for the audience to go up and give feedback about what it is that they just saw. And I guarantee you, sort of like that dance performance that I saw that sat in the back of my mind for 10 years before I did anything about it, if you go to a graduation, you will remember it. They're quite impressive, and I think it will change your mind about hidden prejudices and biases you may not have known that you had, but that will be exposed when you go. So our graduation at Everglades, which is the men's prison, is on May 23rd from 11 to 1. May 25th at Homestead, where Paul is teaching, is Wednesday afternoon on May 25th. And then re-entry, which is our smallest program, is on that Friday, the Friday right before Memorial Day weekend, also in the afternoon. And all you need to do is go onto our website and sign up. You just have to fill out a form. It's a couple hours. I guarantee it will have a huge impact on you. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is, and I really want to highlight this program, it's brand new for us and it is a game changer. We've partnered with an organization out of Washington, D.C. from Georgetown called the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice. The entire program is centered around a 2-hour visit with a guided conversation inside a prison. So you sign up. If you're at Everglades, you get a tour of the prison, which is highly unusual. So you get to go across the center gate and see a dorm, see things that normally no one gets to see. So you get to really experience what life is like for someone who's incarcerated. And then you spend a couple hours in a small group just sitting and having a conversation. And I can tell you again, we started it this semester and it has been a game changer, not just for the people on the outside, but has even escalated the impact that our program has had for our students who have been with us for a couple of years, because it's not a graduation where there's lots of people. It is a sit down. As they all say, it's like you could be in a coffee shop or in a bar. There's lots of laughs. There's some tears. Sometimes the conversation doesn't go any deeper than fishing. And for the women, sometimes it talks about, diet and typical women things. And it gets into abolition and parenting and can be very, very profound. So that is open to anybody 18 or older. We're having the Brahma Kumari come in next week. We've had religious groups, we've had professors. So we're not just looking for the converted, but we're looking for people who maybe are on the fence about how they feel about spending time with someone who is incarcerated. There is an organization, it's Siblings for Victims of Crime, where this woman's brother was killed by his girlfriend. And she came in and the men inside were totally blown away that she had the courage to sit among people who committed crimes. So again, it's an extremely unique opportunity. So, all right, so that's another thing you can do. If you're interested in teaching for us, get in touch. We're really wide open for the opportunity to teach something new or to teach a core course that we, can offer at another institution. You can intern with us. You can volunteer in the office. You can host something at your house where we can talk about exchange for change. You can buy our publications, which are on Amazon. We have several editions of our literary journal called Don't Shake the Spoon. And last year we put out our first national anthology representing 58 voices from incarcerated people in 18 states, documenting what COVID and Black Lives Matter was like while they were incarcerated. So lots and lots of ways to get involved. Get in touch with us and we will get back in touch with you.
Kathy forgot the social media.
So sorry, go for it, Steph. That's my deal here.
This is about this is about the most low impact thing that you could do, but we definitely need people on social media and not just following, but also sharing posts. Paula, who is the program director at Exchange for Change, she's the one that manages the social media, and she's always posting the stuff like the reminders for signing up for Frederick Douglass Project, and reminding people about the graduation signups, and calling out for other things. So please, yes, follow social media and share our posts so that other people see them.
Yeah. So on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, we're at EX4Change, the number 4. That's Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Paula's going to be so happy I'm doing this, is at EX4Change. And we're also on Facebook at Exchange for Change.
So I dropped the links into the chat, into the comment section, so you guys have them there. Also, as you can hear, there is something for everyone. Even as simple as following on social media, because at the end of the day, social media is a global connector. So it's, doesn't have to be small, but the second you share a post on your story or on your feed, you don't know who that's going to impact and who's going to look at that and say, wow, I really want to get involved in this. So obviously we ask that you guys do whatever you can to help. And then if you're interested in volunteering with or learning more from the ACLU, I will drop our information into the comment section as well. You can sign up for any upcoming events, as well as our action group. When you sign up for our action group, one of us will contact you to give you some more information. I want to very quickly just call out some comments that we did receive on Facebook as well as YouTube. But we have one comment that said, "You all add worth to many who have never understood that there was worth within them." And I think that's really powerful because we spoke a lot about just humanization and allowing them to express themselves as well as their experiences. There was another comment that said, "I love that you help them make healthy connections that help them build communication and confidence." So the work that you guys are doing is so important, and we can all see that here. But with that, we thank everyone who's watching, for joining us, whether you watch live or you're watching a recording of this conversation. Like we said, you can check the comments for links if you'd like more information. So thank you again, everyone.